How Walmart killed the American town. The siren wailed as the last hardware store in town rolled down its gate. Out on the bypass, the Walmart glow hummed like a second sunrise. The owner locked the door, rested his forehead on the glass, and said, "We lasted 47 years until this year." He didn't say Walmart. He didn't have to. To understand how that single blue box could drain the rhythm out of a town, you have to go back, past the grand openings and ribbon cuttings, to a promise, always the lowest price. Jobs, identity, tax base, pride. Everything rewired by a retailer that turned thrift into a system. And once you see how the system trained your choices, you can't unsee it. The folksy myth versus the machine. Sam Walton wore the cap, drove the pickup, and preached small-town values like a traveling minister of thrift. He shook hands in parking lots and wrote down notes about end caps on diner napkins. The myth was simple: we're one of you, just bigger. The machine behind it wasn't simple at all. It was discipline sharpened into doctrine. Cheapest always, not this week, not on select items, always. The hook for shoppers was identity. If the store felt like us, then every rollback felt like a favor, not a tactic. The first move was geographic. While rivals battled in big cities, Walmart flanked them through rural America, second- and third-tier towns where land was cheap, permits were quick, and local leaders opened doors. Profit could wait. Scale came first. Clustering stores regionally cut freight miles and boosted sales density. The closer the stores, the faster the replenishment, the lower the unit cost. Meanwhile, something else was happening in those clusters. Competitors suffocated. Independents felt it first. Regional chains followed. Psychologically, shoppers felt smart for consolidating errands. Competitors felt isolated, outnumbered, and late. Inside the company, thrift wasn't branding, it was behavior. Executives flew coach and split motel rooms. Morning meetings were ruthless. Every store manager knew their numbers down to the penny. Inventory turns, shrink, labor hours per thousand in sales. Benchmarking wasn't a review, it was a contest. If your comp sales lagged, your phone rang. The culture made frugality a sport and performance a scoreboard you couldn't look away from. Then came data. Walmart didn't invent the barcode, but it bent it to will. Early on, point-of-sale scanning turned every checkout into a sensor. Items weren't just sold, they were stamped in time, place, and quantity. Suddenly, inventory wasn't a backroom guess. It was a pulse you could read. Cross-docking made the pulse move faster. Trailers rolled into distribution centers and rolled out again with barely a pause. Minutes, not days. Pallets didn't linger on racks. They moved from inbound to outbound like water through a valve. That speed changed the math. If you can cut the time a product spends sitting still, you can cut the cost tied up in it. Lower cost meant lower price. Lower price meant higher volume. Higher volume meant more leverage for the next round of lower prices. Everyday low price wasn't a sign over an aisle. It was a closed loop. Price drives volume, volume funds price. Competitors tried to match price with weekly promotions. Walmart refused the yo-yo. The message trained shoppers, don't chase the flyer. Trust the base price. What nobody knew at the time, except buyers and suppliers in back rooms, was how far the company would push visibility upstream. Retail Link gave vendors a window into sell-through by SKU, by store, by hour. Walmart said it was partnership. It was also control. If your product was lagging in Tulsa on Tuesdays, they knew, you knew, and they knew you knew. Vendor-managed inventory shifted the planning burden onto suppliers. If the shelf was empty, the scorecard recorded it. If a truck was late or a pallet mislabeled, fines hit the invoice. Compliance wasn't a suggestion, it was a cost line. The psychology was simple. Constant visibility removes excuses and raises stress. Meanwhile, the theater on the floor kept the myth alive. Greeters at the doors, rollbacks on bright signs, store chants before opening, folksy language over a steel spine. The hardware of distribution met the software of morale. Associates were told they owned the outcome. They were also told to do more with less. Hours flexed with traffic. Labor models squeezed minutes out of tasks. If it took 18 minutes to zone an aisle yesterday, the target was 16 today. The machine also ran on risk. Real estate was the lever. Walmart bet on sites just outside town where a 4-lane highway could be borrowed without paying for downtown rents. A store becoming a supercenter wasn't an upgrade, it was a takeover. Bring in groceries and you capture weekly trips. Capture weekly trips and you program habit. Program habit and you turn a building into infrastructure. Pharmacies, food, automotive, money services, each added service made the store harder to ignore. Still, behind the counters and the smiles, the discipline tightened. Line reviews with suppliers got clinical. Find 2 to 3% or lose facings. If a product didn't move, it lost space. If two suppliers made the same thing, one was too many. Private label crept in like ivy, great value on staples that trained customers to trust the house. The label wasn't glamour, it was leverage. If a national brand balked, Walmart could point to its own shelf space and say, "We have options." The paradox was plain to anyone counting receipts at home. The cart got fuller for less. Families saved real money, but the savings were built on a structure that extracted efficiency from every link it touched: labor, logistics, land, suppliers, until the margins showed up at the register as a promise kept. The human side saw only the front end: lower prices, friendly greetings, open late. The back end was colder: algorithms, scan guns, clocks that ticked down tasks. Cognitive dissonance did the rest. You can feel grateful for the savings and uneasy about the cost at the same time. This was the moment everything changed, when folksiness fused with systems thinking. Bentonville sold the story of service. The data did the heavy lifting. And once shoppers aligned to the rhythm, weekly runs, rollbacks trusted, one-stop routine, the moat deepened. Competitors fought with ads. Walmart fought with time, distance, and decimal points. The myth never lied outright. It just left out the part about the machine, rural encirclement, and cluster warfare. While rivals stared at metro maps, Walmart drew circles around them. Second and third-tier towns came first, county seats with one newspaper, a Friday night football game, and a stretch of highway where land was cheap and the planning meeting fit in a school cafeteria. The bet was simple: avoid early urban showdowns, build where incumbents were thin, and make distance an ally. Clusters weren't accidents, they were a tactic. Put stores close enough to share a distribution center, far enough to blanket a region, and dense enough to make rivals think twice before entering. Real estate did a lot of the work. A box on the bypass didn't pay downtown rents. Permissive zoning and eager councils shaved months off timelines. The incentives came wrapped in civic pride: abatements, TIF districts, fast-track permits, and a handshake promise of jobs. For towns chasing sales tax, the math looked clean. A big opening day, a crowded lot, a ribbon cut by a mayor who needed a win. Meanwhile, the quiet arbitrage kicked in. Lower land costs, longer hours, standardized layouts, and one playbook run again and again. Inside those clusters, logistics got sharp. Distribution hubs sat within a day's drive of spokes. Cross-docking meant trailers moved through quickly, minutes in the building, not days. Overnight replenishment became normal. If a store sold out of motor oil by sundown, a pallet appeared by morning. That speed wasn't just convenience, it was suffocation. Independents couldn't match the cadence. Regional chains felt the oxygen drop first. Ads couldn't beat a consistent base price and a shelf that rarely went bare. Competitor attrition wasn't dramatic, it was steady. A grocer misses a holiday season. A hardware shop loses the Saturday rush. A pharmacy sees its refill traffic bleed to a counter near aisle 7. When a chain tried to answer with a lone store at the edge of a Walmart cluster, freight costs spiked and sales density lagged. The cluster turned into a moat, and the moat got wider with every new box added to the grid. There was a psychological encirclement, too. Weekly habits shifted. The one-stop trip replaced the circuit: bakery, drugstore, hardware, feed. Park once, fill the trunk, get home. Every extra department pulled in another errand. Tire rotation, money orders, a quick clinic visit. Tasks that used to scatter across town moved under one roof. As people stopped lingering on Main Street, foot traffic starved the places that depended on it. Even the coffee shop 2 doors down from the old grocer felt the chill. Habit formation beat loyalty, friction lost to certainty. Meanwhile, the P&L in Bentonville favored more density. Put 3 stores within an hour of each other and you didn't triple overhead, you spread it. Truck routes tightened, fuel costs fell per case, managers could share best practices quickly. A failed promotion in store 1427 became a lesson for store 1431 by the next week. The data stitched the region together. Retail Link told buyers which SKU faltered in which town. Those corrections fed back into local assortments. More hunting gear here, more school uniforms there. Zoning battles flared in some places, but timing mattered. Get in early before resistance organized and the blueprint set the tone. Supercenter footprints reshaped traffic patterns, new turn lanes, wider aprons, stoplights calibrated to weekend rushes. Once installed, the roadwork made the next pad-ready parcel more attractive. One box begets another. 2 miles down, a competitor's parcel looks worse. Longer drive from the highway, fewer rooftops in the trade area. A tax district less willing to offer breaks after the first package went out the door. The attrition on the perimeter sent signals back up the chain. Suppliers watched sell-through concentrate in Walmart doors. A regional chain that once anchored their volume closed 3 sites. A dozen independents bowed out quietly. In line reviews, buyers didn't need to posture. Shelf space in clusters meant guaranteed turns. If a supplier hesitated on price, the threat wasn't theatrical. Lose facings in a cluster and you didn't just lose a store, you lost a region. For towns, the early years felt like a bargain. Jobs came even if they were part-time. The tax receipts bumped, parking lots were full, but the trade baked in a dependency. When the blue box defined the retail map, other investments followed it, out parcels with fast food, dollar stores filling the small gaps, a copycat strip. Downtown learned a new rhythm, antique fairs on weekends, empty windows on weekdays, and a grant application taped to a storefront that used to be a pharmacy. Here's the part that mattered for the larger war. Cluster warfare wasn't about squeezing one rival, it was about changing how regions breathe. Overnight replenishment, a shared labor pool trained to standard processes, ad spend concentrated on a predictable halo radius, and a pricing promise that traveled by word of mouth faster than any circular. Once a cluster settled, the cost to dislodge it climbed. You needed more than a discount, you needed a different map. And that map was waiting in the back room, in the data that turned geography into leverage, building the invisible backbone, data and speed. To understand how the clusters breathed, you have to stand on a loading dock at 2 a.m. and hear the rhythm. A trailer backs in, seals break, pallets slide, scanners chirp, and 20 minutes later that freight is gone, already rolling toward another door. Cross-docking wasn't a tweak, it was the spine. Product didn't sit, it moved. Every minute shaved in the distribution center shaved pennies off cost, and those pennies funded the next price cut. Barcode adoption made that speed measurable. Point-of-sale scanning tied the register to the warehouse. The moment a gallon of milk passed over a laser in Missoula, Bentonville felt it. Not someday, not in a weekly report, now. That gave Walmart a living inventory, a heartbeat at scale. Instead of forecasting by guess and buffer, they tuned replenishment by what actually sold, by store, by hour, by day of week, in heat waves and snowstorms, after paydays and before school starts. The company didn't just react to demand. It learned its patterns. What nobody outside the vendor halls saw early on was how hard the company pushed that visibility upstream. EDI, electronic data interchange, replaced faxes and phone calls. Orders hit a supplier's system automatically. Confirmations shot back, labels printed with the right barcodes and pallet IDs to flow through cross-docks without friction. Errors weren't annoyances, they were costs. A wrong label stalled a pallet, delayed a route, and triggered a chargeback. Compliance got recorded in numbers, not arguments. Then came Retail Link, the private portal that changed the power balance. Vendors got a login and a view into their own performance granular enough to feel invasive. Sell-through by SKU, by store, by hour, with turns, out of stocks, and markdowns all on display. Walmart called it collaboration. Suppliers called it the scoreboard you couldn't escape. If a deodorant brand dipped on Tuesdays in Tulsa, there it was. If a seasonal end cap failed in 2 districts, the data told the story before the rep walked in the door. The buyer didn't need a threat, the chart did the talking. Vendor-managed inventory made the shift explicit. Planning moved upstream. Suppliers were expected to watch the signal, forecast the need, and get product positioned before the shelf went bare. Miss the mark in the OTIF rule on time in full would remind you. Arrive late, light, or mislabeled, and the system logged the miss. Fines weren't personal, they were math, auto-deducted and hard to claw back. Over time, compliance became culture. Pallet patterns got standardized. Cases became shelf-ready. Packaging redesigned to flow faster, not just look prettier. Meanwhile, in the backrooms and breakrooms, the same clock ticked. Store apps told associates which tasks were due and how long they should take. Case counts married to planograms, shelf gaps flagged by handhelds, backroom locations mapped to speed the pull. The faster the pull, the quicker the fill, the fewer lost sales. Every second saved in an aisle showed up as a stronger comp. The discipline compressed slack. It also compressed breathing room for people doing the work. The speed had ripple effects you could see from the highway. Distribution centers weren't warehouses in the old sense, they were orchestras. Inbound streams met outbound streams, with yard management systems choreographing which trailer hit which door. A carton spent minutes inside, not days. That meant Walmart could run leaner inventory without starving stores. Less idle product meant lower working capital. Lower working capital meant the company could price leaner too. EDLP, everyday low price, wasn't a slogan. It was what the plumbing allowed. When storms hit, the system showed its teeth. A hurricane warning pinged, and the algorithm shifted assortments. Batteries up, water up, Pop-Tarts up because they sell and don't need refrigeration. Trucks rerouted, backrooms pre-staged. The response looked like foresight, but it was pattern recognition flexing muscle. The same played out in school seasons, stimulus check weeks, and the first warm Saturday in spring. Speed made the company feel omnipresent, like it knew the town's calendar better than the town council. Suppliers learned new reflexes. Line reviews weren't just about price, they were about flow. Can you pack 12 instead of 10? Can your case open cleanly on the shelf? Can your pallet stack in a pattern that cuts seconds at the store? If yes, you kept space. If not, a competing vendor or a house brand was ready with a tighter design. The bargaining chip was time. Save it for Walmart and you bought yourself time on the shelf. Wasted and you paid for it, literally through deduction. Meanwhile, rivals tried to copy pieces. A scanner here, a new warehouse there, a weekend promotion to catch up. But without the density and the feed of live sell-through, their systems had lag. A promo created a spike, then a gap. Walmart's base price and fast fill smoothed the curve. Shoppers felt it as reliability. Vendors felt it as a mandate. Towns felt it as gravity, goods moving in with a cadence that made other stores feel slow, even when they were. Here's the quiet irony. The more transparent the system became, the less forgiving it was. Data removed excuses. It also removed slack that sometimes cushions real life. Traffic jams, sick kids, a snowstorm in a county 2 states away. The machine kept time. People had to match it. And yet in the aisles, all anyone saw was the shelf that rarely went empty and a price that rarely bounced. The invisible backbone did its job. Make speed feel normal, make precision feel ordinary, make a nationwide network behave like a corner store that never runs out. Line reviews and the new power hierarchy. Behind the smiling greeter and the neat shelf is a calendar invite that vendors dread. Line review season. It's not a meeting, it's a reckoning. Buyers walk in with retail link charts and a baseline that isn't up for debate. Find 2 to 3% or lose facings. Not someday. This reset. The stakes are simple. Space is money. Eye level is more money. End caps are rent you pay in performance, not cash. The room runs on a quiet script. First, the scoreboard. Sell-through by SKU, by store, velocity trends, margin after markdown. If your turn slowed, the chart shows the slope. If your promo lifted sales but wrecked margin, the red bar flashes. Then comes the ask that isn't an ask. Can you take cost out, not list price cost? Can you reformulate the pack? 12 instead of 10. Thinner corrugate. Shelf-ready cases that pop and face in second. A tighter pallet pattern that shaves touches in the backroom. SKU rationalization sits at the center. Too many flavors split velocity. Too many sizes cannibalize each other. Buyers draw a box. The top 20% of SKUs earn 80% of the space. The rest must justify their footprint. If they can't, they go dark. For suppliers, that cut isn't cosmetic. Lose a SKU and the factory loses a run. Lose a facing and the sales team loses a paycheck. Consolidation follows. Walmart doesn't say single supplier, but the gravitational pull is there. Simpler assortments flow faster. Fewer vendors are easier to police. Dependence creeps in as a consequence, not a threat. Private label sits in the corner, quiet leverage with a bright label, great value. The buyer never needs to say it. The comparison sits in the planogram. If the national brand won't meet the target cost, the house brand can fill the gap with a design-to-price spec. Quote to carton becomes the exercise. Start with the retail Walmart wants, back into the cost you can survive, and engineer the product to hit it. If you can't, the white bag moves in. Mandates come wrapped as supply chain improvements. Packaging must meet a footprint spec. Cases must open cleanly with fewer blades. Pallets must stack to a standard height to maximize trailer cube. The unit count per case changes because the shelf needs a set that faces without wasted inches. On a spreadsheet, it's seconds saved. In a plant, it's a retooling and a line change with capital behind it. Vendors nod because the alternative is worse. Deduction code. Fines and fees make the culture tangible. OTIF isn't abstract. Miss the window and a percentage comes off the invoice. Short a case, wrong label, wrong pallet, there's a code for that. The deductions arrive fast, the appeals slow. Over time, the fee line in a supplier P&L becomes a second cost of goods, one that punishes variability. The discipline works. It also shifts risk upstream. A snowstorm, a labor hiccup, a supplier's supplier failing a QC check. Those become a vendor's problem, priced in as compliance. Meanwhile, the politics of the aisle play out in inches. A brand might accept worse margin to protect its 4 feet of toothpaste because losing it means losing the impulse lift from eye level. Another might fund a secondary placement near travel size as a hedge. Co-op dollars flow, but Walmart's currency is efficiency, not end-aisle fireworks. The buyer wants the reset to run clean. Straight lines, strong sellers, minimal touches. Here's the part that most shoppers never see. Line reviews aren't only about price and packaging, they're about tempo. Can you mirror the cadence, forecast with retail link, ship mixed pallets that match planograms, support seasonal resets with the right packout on the right day at the right hour? Buyers reward vendors who move like the machine. Those vendors get early reads on space opportunities, a trial end cap, a test in 100 stores. The laggards get fewer chances and less sympathetic ears. Consolidation accelerates as the rules harden. Secondary brands look for a lifeline, maybe a private label contract for Walmart, maybe a pivot to club packs elsewhere. Some exit categories entirely, selling lines to bigger players who can meet the compliance math. The hierarchy clarifies. At the top, a short list of suppliers that can absorb cost-down asks, redesign packaging on a dime, and live inside OTIF. In the middle, national brands that compromise on margin to hold space. At the bottom, the casualties of rationalization, displaced to discount channels or gone. Find 2 to 3% has limits, and this is where the sourcing map starts to tilt. Domestic plants squeeze until they can't, then someone suggests moving a subassembly, then a full run overseas. The line review didn't tell anyone to offshore, it just set the bar that made the decision look rational. When every season brings a new mandate, lighter board, fewer touches, tighter cube, someone asks the question, where else can we take cost? The answer will show up miles away, in ports and dorm factories. But it started here, in a room where the scoreboard runs the meeting and the shelf decides who lives there. Offshoring at scale, the China pivot. When the scoreboard kept asking for 2 to 3%, the map shifted. The question in line reviews, where else can we take cost, found its answer across the Pacific. In the 1990s, policy winds blew in one direction. Most favored nation status normalized trade with China year after year, then permanence arrived alongside WTO accession. Ports expanded. The Pearl River Delta turned into a factory constellation. If you needed plastic molded, metal stamped, fabric cut, or electronics assembled, someone in Guangdong would quote it fast. Walmart's buyers didn't move alone, they steered. Vendor summits and sourcing fairs connected U.S. brands to Chinese factories with a message. Here's the target retail, back into the cost. Quote to carton became standard. Start at $4.88 on the shelf, subtract Walmart's margin, subtract freight and duty, subtract your overhead, and what's left is what the factory has to hit. If a domestic plant couldn't meet it, the conversation shifted from how to make it here to how to manage quality there. Factories rose to meet the math. Dorm-style housing, long shifts, piece-rate lines tuned to volume, and margins shaved thin enough to cut paper. A buyer's ask, thinner corrugate, tighter pallet, shelf-ready case turned into engineering at the source. A cardboard flap became a perforation. A blister pack lost grams. A pallet stacked to a millimeter spec. Changes that saved seconds in an Arkansas backroom demanded new dies and jigs in Shenzhen. The cost downs looked tiny in Bentonville spreadsheets. They were capital decisions in Dongguan workshops. Meanwhile, containers became the new warehouse. With cross-docking at home, the cheapest place to hold inventory was at sea. 40-foot boxes stacked in ship bays doubled as rolling stockrooms. Lead times lengthened, but the system absorbed it by learning the seasonal pulse. Order earlier, stage near ports, sync to school starts, holidays, and weather patterns. EDI stretched its wire across oceans. ASNs, advanced ship notices, pinged before a box left Yanshan. When it landed in Long Beach, the label layouts were already matched to flow through DC doors without hesitation. Imports surged. Walk any aisle and the country of origin tags changed in waves. Toys, tools, housewares, small appliances, apparel basics. Domestic plants, especially mid-scale ones, felt the ground shift. The math that once worked short hauls, quick turns, small batches, lost to labor arbitrage and mega-scale procurement. A plant that ran 3 shifts for a regional chain couldn't survive when that chain lost space to a supercenter cluster. The orders consolidated into one buyer with one requirement: hit the number. Here, where policy and practice braided tight. The consumer welfare standard in Antitrust judged outcomes by price for consumers, not by supplier health or town vitality. Lower shelf prices looked like success. Walmart's EDLP, funded by global sourcing, became proof that scale served shoppers. The standards didn't count the cost of a shuttered mill or the hollowed tax base. They counted the cart. On the ground in China, speed met strain. A supplier's supplier mattered now. Resins, pigments, fasteners, paperboard all had to align or OTIF penalties would roll downhill. Quality control became a second scoreboard. Failed checks triggered rework, delays, deductions. Some U.S. brands placed their own people in factories to watch lines, catch defects, tweak processes. Others leaned on trading companies that aggregated small shops into one export promise. Over time, the winners were the plants that could manufacture process, not just product. ISO checklists, barcoded pallets, carton markings that read to U.S. scanners without a hiccup. The human cost stayed off the balance sheets. Dorm rooms packed tight, overtime ramps before holidays, audits scheduled and unscheduled with factories learning to pass them as much as to meet them. Safety and wage standards improved under attention, then slid when attention moved on. The pressure never left. A penny saved in corrugate became $100,000 saved across a run. That penny had to come from somewhere: board weight, cycle time, headcount. Back in American towns, the savings arrived in real ways. A slow paycheck stretched further. School supplies cost less. A coffee maker that would have been a birthday splurge became a Tuesday purchase. The paradox sharpened. The same price tags that helped a family budget eroded the factories that once hired their neighbors. The benefits were immediate and visible. The losses showed up as a for lease sign on a block that used to hum. Meanwhile, Walmart turned sourcing into a competitive moat. The company's volume made it a first call for factories looking to scale. Retail link extended overseas. Vendors abroad learned to read the same charts and plan to the same cadence. Packaging specs, pallet patterns, ASN compliance, they crossed languages because they were math. When oil prices spiked or ports clogged, the system flexed. Alternate ports, transloading, rail over truck, air freight triage for must-arrive windows. The machine learned global variability like it had learned Saturday rush. Competing retailers tried to plug into the same networks, but the leverage gap mattered. A supplier would quote one price to a buyer with 10,000 doors and another to a buyer with 800. Chargebacks for noncompliance trained the network to Walmart's standard. Over years, the standard became the industry's expectation. If you wanted U.S. shelf space at scale, you played by the rules written in Bentonville and enforced on docks in Shenzhen. Some categories resisted. Perishables tethered to local, regulated chains fought off full offshoring. Premium brands guarded quality with domestic production or nearshore compromises. But the center of the store, the aisle after aisle of dry goods, basics, and small durables, tilted hard to imports. Domestic plants specialized or closed. Towns adapted or didn't. The price in the aisle looked like a win. The cost hid in longer commutes, part-time retail replacing full-time manufacturing, and a local tax base leaning on sales instead of payroll. The pivot wasn't a single decision. It was 1,000 line reviews adding up to a shipping lane. The Walmart effect on Main Street. Drive through a town 6 months after a supercenter opens, and you can feel the rhythm change. It starts with receipts. Local grocers see double-digit drops the first quarter. Meat, milk, cereal bleeding to an aisle that pins price to the floor. Hardware stores lose the Saturday crowd to a fluorescent tool wall that's cheap enough to make brand loyalty wobble. Apparel boutiques watch basics walk out their door before noon, then don't come back. Because socks and school tees now live next to groceries and oil changes. Business mortality doesn't look like a TV collapse. It looks like one bad season, then two. A grocer misses Easter because the ad didn't land. A second-generation pharmacist sees refills drift to the counter by aisle 7, where the copay rings in alongside school supplies. 12 to 24 months after the grand opening, the attrition shows up in paper. Going out of business signs, silent auctions for shelving, and a landlord answering calls about subdividing a space that doesn't quite fit anymore. The ripple isn't only retail. Service businesses tied to that foot traffic feel the draft. The diner that lived on 11:30 a.m. coffee from the hardware crowd loses its early lunch. The print shop that ran circulars for 3 independents loses 2 clients and cuts a shift. A bookkeeper who handled payroll for a family grocer watches the hours disappear, then picks up part-time at the supercenter, a different cadence entirely. Labor shifts with it. Walmart brings jobs, but not the same jobs. Part-time becomes the norm, benefit thresholds managed by software, schedules published late, hours flexing with traffic. A full-time union grocery job once anchored a mortgage. A patchwork of 28 hours across evenings and weekends anchors a budget in pencil. Just-in-time scheduling saves labor minutes. It costs predictability at home. Childcare gets complicated. Second jobs collide with closing shift. Paychecks swing month to month. Meanwhile, the tax base trades one shape for another. Local officials celebrated abatements and TIFs when the site was graded. Sales tax bumps arrive with the grand opening, and the ribbon cutting feels like a win. A year later, downtown's assessed values dip as vacancies spread. The property tax receipts that used to fund the library came from many parcels. Now, more of the bet rides on a single box at the edge of town and a ring of outparcels selling drive-through meal. The consumer paradox sits in the cart. The family pushing it saves real money. Back to school is less painful. Groceries stretch to the weekend. Gas and time saved by consolidating errands matters when pay is volatile. People aren't making a mistake. They're making a rational choice inside a system that rewards one-stop trips and low base prices. The choice trains demand. Once you trust the rollback, brand loyalty starts to slip. A familiar cereal goes on the list. But the house brand rides home when the gap is $1 and the rent's due. End caps do quiet work too. Loss leaders at eye level, rotating deals on detergent, snacks, batteries, nudge basket size up. Seasonal resets teach speed. Halloween in September, Christmas in October, patio sets when snow is still on the curb. The aisles choreograph a calendar that moves faster than the town square ever did. Disposable cycles feel normal when new feels cheap and last season feels like clutter. The old circuit of stores, grocer, hardware, pharmacy, shoe, shrinks to one parking lot, one receipt, one routine. On Main Street, the social fabric thins in ways spreadsheets miss. The pharmacist who knew your meds by heart doesn't see you anymore. The hardware owner who loaned a tool set for a weekend project can't keep the doors open. The bulletin board where summer jobs and bake sales found eyes goes quiet. Events try to fill the gap. First Fridays, farmers markets, pop-up fairs, but their energy fights weekday emptiness. It's hard to build habit without daily needs pulling you through the block. Not every place folds. Some pivot. Co-ops form to keep a grocer alive with member dues and sweat equity. Niche shops carve out a lane, repair over replace, specialty over commodity. A coffee shop adds a roaster and ships online. A butcher goes whole animal and sells classes. These wins are real. They're also narrow and labor-heavy, built on community buy-in that takes time to assemble and can't be mass-produced. Meanwhile, the ghost box problem lurks on the horizon. When Walmart leapfrogs to a bigger site or trims a cluster, the shell it leaves behind is hard to reuse. Deep floor plates, limited windows, parking sized for a crowd that isn't coming. Some towns rezone and cut the box into a school, a church, a call center. Many can't. The building sits, a reminder of a bet that moved on. The vacancy carries a psychic cost, a daily view of how fragile the new center can be. The legal guardrails barely twitch. Under the consumer welfare standard, Antitrust looks at price and output. Prices are down, selections broad. The standard declares victory. Predatory pricing claims run into EDLP framed as scale and efficiency, not malice. The very logic that made the cart cheaper makes the case harder to argue. Towns learn the limits of policy after the fact, when the bargaining power already lives in one address. Still, ask families at the register and many will tell you the truth. They feel the savings. They also feel the lost time with a manager who knew their name, the longer drive when a grocery closes, the scramble when hours shift. The effect isn't a villain monologue. It's a system expressing itself through everyday choices. The blue box didn't invent scarcity. It organized it, priced it, and made it convenient. This is how a habit becomes an ecosystem, and how an ecosystem makes a town bend. Training demand. How America learned to buy. Price took the steering wheel first. EDLP trained people to stop waiting for circulars and start trusting the base tag. A shopper who used to clip coupons began to skip the hunt. The signal was simple and sticky. The shelf would be fair tomorrow, not just today. Brand loyalty softened under that drumbeat. If the house brand matched the national on taste enough times, the gap in price did the persuading. End caps became lessons, not just displays. A rotating set of loss leaders taught timing, detergent this week, paper towels the next, and nudged baskets to grow without feeling like a splurge. The psychology was quiet. You came for cereal, you left with batteries because the brand you recognized was stacked high at eye level at a number that felt like a win. That win reinforced trust. Trust shortened the time you spent comparing. Shorter comparisons trained speed. The loop, trigger, action, reward, repeat next week. Pack sizes did the rest. Value packs looked responsible, more per unit, fewer trips, better planning. The cart changed shape as families learned to buy in bulk, even without a membership. Once you store 12 paper towel rolls in a closet, you've normalized a rhythm. Stock up now, think about it later. Inventory moved from store backrooms into homes. That shift locked in return trips when the cadence hit empty at the same time across thousands of houses. Seasonal resets rewired the calendar. Halloween in September wasn't decoration creep, it was habit training. Seeing costumes early meant planning early, meant adding candy to a September grocery run, meant one less errand in October. The aisle taught you to act now because later would be a different set. By mid-October, Christmas moved in. Lights, wrapping, themed bakeware, small add-ons that felt like preparation, not impulse. Disposable cycles felt normal, when displays made next month feel present. Meanwhile, the one-stop trip became a family ritual. Saturday morning wasn't a circuit of 5 stops. It was a coordinated push through a predictable path: produce, pantry, pharmacy, pet, oil change if you could swing it. The store layout trained routes. End caps caught you between departments. Power aisles framed seasons. Even detours were engineered. A clinic visit meant a pass by home goods. A tire rotation meant 30 minutes wandering near electronics. Time in the building turned into sales per hour. Families call it efficiency. The model calls it conditioning. Inside that routine, Walmart used small rules to shape behavior. Rollback flags drew eyes downward, away from premium shelves. Private label faced the lane like a dare. Here's the same thing cheaper. When enough house items delivered good enough, the basket tipped. A family that used to buy 4 national brands now bought 2, then 1. The dollars saved reinforced the shift. The trust migrated from brands to the building. Apps and receipts added a digital loop. Savings catcher-era promises of price matching on the back end and e-receipts that logged purchases taught shoppers that the system was watching for value, so you didn't have to. Curbside and BOPIS layered convenience onto trust. Once you built a saved list in the app, reordering took minutes. Substitutions trained tolerance. If a different brand showed up at the same price and it worked, the next cart included it by default. The friction to try something new fell to a tap. Meanwhile, kids learned the aisle language. Back-to-school kits bundled brands and basics in one grab. Sports seasons meant a predictable swing through snacks and coolers. Holidays became checklists the store wrote for you. Over time, the town square's calendar faded next to the store's version. Tax refund season meant big-ticket electronics. First warm weekend meant grills and fertilizer. Cold snap meant space heaters and socks. The retail clock ran fast and loud. There was a social script, too. Returning from a Walmart run with a full trunk felt like competence. You stretched a budget, got ahead on supplies, did it in one drive. For families juggling variable hours, that mattered. The store made good choices easy and fast. It also made slow choices harder. Browsing downtown took time and extra gas. Comparing butchers or hardware advice demanded attention. The aisle offered certainty at a glance. That's how routine beats ritual. What nobody saw consciously was the training effect on value itself. Cheap stopped sounding like compromise and started sounding like smart. Repairs lost ground to replacements when a new toaster cost less than a fix. Fashion cycles sped up when a pair of jeans dropped under $20. Storage bins multiplied because seasonal decor multiplied. The house became a satellite warehouse for a retail system designed to move. Meanwhile, brands learned to market to this cadence. Ship-ready shippers, seasonal packaging, bundle SKUs that matched end caps. Suppliers that didn't adapt watched facings shrink. The lesson flowed one way, aligned to Walmart's tempo, and you earn space in a national habit. Miss it, and you become a specialty buy on a weekend your customer no longer has. In the end, demand wasn't discovered. It was taught through tags that didn't bounce, displays that told you what week it was, and a building that turned shopping into choreography. Once learned, it stuck. Labor, unions, and the scheduling clock. Inside the bright aisles, the tightest controls landed on time, who worked when, how long, and at what cost. The company's posture toward unions set the tone early. Organizing wasn't a conversation, it was a fire alarm. When a butcher shop in Texas voted to unionize, the fresh meat counters disappeared as positions were converted and departments restructured. The message traveled through breakrooms faster than any memo. Unions didn't get a seat at the table, they got the table removed. HR playbooks paired that stance with a strategy that treated hours like inventory. Full-time meant benefits and predictability. Part-time meant flexibility in the spreadsheet and volatility in life. New hires heard promises of internal mobility. The ladder of department lead to assistant manager to salaried manager. Some climbed it. Many found bottlenecks where a handful of coveted slots sat behind performance metrics tied to things they couldn't fully control. Traffic flow, shrink, mystery shops, and comp sales that dipped when the town's paycheck cycles shifted. The schedule lived in an app. Algorithms listened to last year's sales by hour, weather forecasts, school calendars, and local events, then spat out labor needs in 15-minute blocks. Just-in-time scheduling looked elegant from a distance. Match payroll to demand, keep the lines short, cut idle time. From the kitchen table, it meant shifts finalized late, split days that chewed through childcare, and a call at dawn asking if you could come in 2 hours early. When sales ran soft, hours vanished midweek. When they ran hot, a text begged associates to stay. The clock flexed, paychecks wobbled. Associates learned to reverse engineer the machine. A seasoned cashier knew Saturday's wave by the parking lot count and the tenor of morning huddles. A stalker timed breaks between trucks to dodge write-ups for missed pallets. The best workers hit task times the system expected, zone the aisle in 16 minutes, pull the top 20 fast movers before 9, push the seasonal end cap live by lunch. Shave 30 seconds here and there, and you kept your rating high enough to ask for better hours. Miss a week during a kid's flu, and the rating dipped. The shift slid later, and a second job got harder to balance. Wage headlines complicated the picture. In some years, base pay rose under pressure from local minimum wage laws, from public scrutiny, from competitors raising their floors. The PR said progress. On the floor, higher base rates often came with tighter hours to keep payroll ratios in line. $1 more per hour didn't offset the lost fifth shift. Overtime existed mostly as a rumor outside holiday peaks. Benefits thresholds sat like cliffs. 32 hours meant health care, so schedules hovered at 28 for many, a cushion built into labor models to avoid accidental eligibility. Anti-union training bled into everyday routines. New hire videos framed the open-door policy as the answer to grievances. Managers kept union vulnerability assessments that tracked morale signals, high turnover, missed breaks, whisper networks. When organizing flickered, corporate labor teams landed quietly. Meetings framed as listening sessions, resets that moved a problem manager out, a surprise store improvement project to mop up the worst frustrations. The tactics weren't theatrical. They were procedural, as disciplined as inventory turns. The psychological lever: isolate momentum before it becomes identity. Peak seasons pushed people to their edges. Black Friday week wasn't a day. It was a month-long sprint of overnight mods, security briefings, and 12-hour shifts that still managed to dodge overtime caps through clever staggering. January clawed back payroll with cut hours just as credit card bills hit home. Summer reset weekends stacked heavy freight with skeleton crews and exacting planogram. Burnout didn't announce itself. It showed up as a no-call on a Sunday. A great associate disappearing to a warehouse job with steadier hours, a department lead bowing out after a holiday run. Meanwhile, stores leaned into ownership language. Huddles celebrated wins, fast lines, clean in stocks, a community event photo posted to the breakroom board. Associates were told their ideas mattered. Sometimes they did. A revised cap map that cut steps, a redesigned bin label that saved seconds. But when an idea bumped into the national playbook, the playbook won. The sense of agency ran up against the reality of standardized everything. Pricing from the center, assortments from analytics, labor from an algorithm. Scheduling's hidden costs lived outside the store. Parents swapped childcare with neighbors whose schedules also shifted weekly. Community college students dropped a class after the third sudden midweek close. A second job at a call center fizzled when shifts overlapped too often. Transport hiccups, one missed bus, a car that wouldn't turn over, cascaded into attendance points that took months to erase. The system assumed frictionless lives. People aren't frictionless. Yet for many, the job still penciled out better than the alternatives nearby. The store offered predictable policies, a path that sometimes did pay off, and a manager or two who quietly blocked out steady shifts for reliable people. Healthcare at 32 hours changed a household budget. A quarterly bonus for hitting shrink targets bought school shoes. And for workers who understood the rhythm and could bend their life to it, the machine rewarded speed and discipline with steadier ground. The irony sat there in fluorescent light. A retailer that promised certainty to shoppers created uncertainty for many of its own. The The same precision that kept shelves full squeezed minutes from human days. Unions tried to promise a counterweight. The company's structure pushed back with 1,000 small levers, benefit cliffs, anti-organizing playbooks, algorithmic shifts that made collective action a hard bet. The clock kept time. People tried to keep up. Law's blind spot. Antitrust, zoning, and subsidies. While associates watched the scheduling clock, another clock ticked in courtrooms and council chambers. The question wasn't moral, it was legal. Under the consumer welfare standard, antitrust asked one thing: are prices lower and output higher for consumers? If yes, scale looked like success. Walmart's EDLP fit that frame perfectly. Cheaper carts, broad assortments, more stores. On paper, the case closed itself. Predatory pricing claims surfaced when independence collapsed after price wars. But in hearings, Walmart's lawyers didn't argue charity, they argued efficiency. Cross-docking, retail link, vendor-managed inventory, OTIF discipline. These weren't cudgels, they said they were systems that cut cost. When a grocer accused the company of undercutting below cost, the defense pointed to economies of scale. Better freight, better turns, better shrink, and a base price that didn't need loss leader theatric. Courts, bound to consumer welfare metrics, saw lower shelf tags and shrugged. Harm to competitors didn't equal harm to competition. Meanwhile, mergers in other industries drew heat. Walmart's growth arrived one permit at a time. Zoning boards faced a different calculus: land use, traffic, tax base, and public sentiment. Meetings filled with two kinds of testimony. On one side, small business owners warning of Main Street death. On the other, residents and officials talking jobs, sales tax, and convenience. Permits often hinged on proffers: turn lanes, stormwater basins, signage limits, and the promise that growth would follow the new stoplight. Local subsidies sweetened deals. Abatements trimmed property taxes for years. TIF districts let new sales taxes pay for the infrastructure that drew shoppers to the box. Land sold cheap because the council wanted a headline. The bidding wars didn't look like giveaways at first. They looked like bets. Capture regional spending, keep shoppers from driving to the next county, anchor other tenants on out parcel. Ribbon cuttings came with speeches about keeping dollars local, even as the profits traveled to a headquarters far away. Zoning rewrote maps. Supercenter footprints demanded wide aprons, big setbacks, and arterials widened to handle weekend surges. Once built, those roads favored large format retail. A bookstore with a narrow frontage on Main Street couldn't absorb the traffic or match the visibility. Site plans replicated across counties: a blue box, a ring of pads, a pond, a big lot. The pattern made every next box cheaper to approve because it looked like the last one, and the last one worked. Here's what nobody priced into the vote: the exit. When a store relocated to a bigger site or a cluster thinned, the ghost box problem landed in a code book that wasn't written for it. Deep floor plates, limited windows, specialized slabs, and parking fields too large for typical reuse. Zoning didn't have a fast path to carve the shell into something else. Covenants layered another trap. Some deeds carried restrictions that barred grocery competitors from moving in. The box that once promised life to a corridor could sit dark for years, a monument to a deal that didn't imagine the second act. Sunk cost psychology kicks in. Leaders hesitate to rewrite rules because admitting the miss hurts more than fixing it. Antitrust never touched that. It wasn't built to. Consumer welfare doesn't measure the cost of a dead anchor on municipal finances, the loss of a walking district's daytime foot traffic, or the way labor volatility ripples through childcare networks. It measures prices and output. Prices went down, output went up. Case dismissed. Towns adapted within those blinders. Some wrote big-box ordinances that capped square footage, demanded breakup-ready designs, or required demolition bonds so an empty shell wouldn't linger. Others negotiated clawbacks on subsidies, missed job targets, and the tax break evaporates. A few forced mixed-use pads and sidewalks, trying to stitch the bypass back to downtown. But across thousands of places, momentum favored the template. A council facing a budget hole chose the near-term sales tax, even if the long-term math was murky. When communities pushed back hard, the playbook adjusted. Smaller footprints, neighborhood markets, softer facades, sustainability pledges, Project Gigaton on the environmental side, community grants on the civic side showed up in presentations. Critics called it PR, operations teams called it incremental improvement. The legal backdrop didn't change. Consumer welfare still judged by the cart, not the county ledger. Meanwhile, subsidies reshaped competition. A rival grocer without abatements looked slow and overpriced when a subsidized box opened with a grand aisle of perishables. Complaints to state attorneys general met the same wall. It's legal to offer incentives. It's legal to accept them. The market was working. To fix, it would require rewriting the test itself, expanding antitrust beyond the cart to include structure, power, and place. That debate lived in journals and hearings while on the ground. Forklifts set new end caps and trucks kept time. In the end, law didn't miss Walmart. It measured the wrong thing for this kind of story. By the time that became clear, the roadwork was poured, the tax district carved, and the town's habit trained to turn right at the light. Supercenters, groceries, and store as infrastructure. Groceries changed the cadence. Dry goods built habit, but perishables locked it. The day a general merchandise box added a full grocery, the trip went from optional to weekly. Milk and meat don't wait for flyers. A family that might have drifted between stores now had a reason to show up every 7 days, rain or shine. That frequency turned the building from retail into infrastructure. You didn't visit, you relied on it. Reliance feels safe until the box moved. Groceries also rewired margin math. Low markups at the perimeter pulled traffic past higher margin center aisles. A cart that started with cheap bananas rolled by small appliances, teas, and toys. The path wasn't accidental. Power aisles framed seasons. Inline end caps carried the next best offer, not the absolute best, nudging the basket without breaking trust. Even the bakery did work beyond bread. Warm smells near entry points signaled freshness. A cue that made the produce look better and the store feel local despite the square footage. Pharmacies sealed the routine. Refill cycles synced with grocery cycles. Monthly meds meant monthly exposure to every aisle. Clinics added a new rhythm. A sore throat on Tuesday turned into a flu test and a pickup for soup, tissues, and a space heater. Money services pulled in people outside the traditional banking system. Check cashing, money orders, prepaid cards, traffic that used to split across multiple storefronts now fed one set of doors. Under one roof, the store became a substitute for missing civic capacity. Private label quietly climbed the ladder in the new format. Great value wasn't flashy, it was ever-present. In dairy pantry cleaning, it filled the gaps between national brands with a promise: close enough, cheaper. Every successful trial stole loyalty from the brand and handed it to the building. Over years, the label spread into categories that used to be brand strongholds: organic staples, gluten-free basics, even premium adjacent snacks. The store taught shoppers a new hierarchy. Trust place first, then price, then brand. Competitors reacted in different languages. Kmart staggered under legacy systems and a fading identity. A few attempts at soft home and celebrity lines couldn't cover slow replenishment and tired stores. Target pivoted to design and curated feel, smaller assortments, stronger private brands with style, bright seasonal stories that felt like a move. Costco chose a different moat: membership, limited SKUs, and treasure hunt value with a wage structure that built loyalty inside and out. Each found an edge, but the weekly perishables engine gave Walmart Supercenter a metronome others couldn't steal. Design turned pragmatic. Wide aisles, long sightlines, refrigerated runs that allowed quick facing, back-of-house coolers placed for minimal steps from dock to shelf. Store schematics shrank touches. Shelf-ready packaging let associates rip and face instead of decant and arrange. Case counts matched planogram facings to cut cardboard and time. On a Saturday, you could watch the choreography. Trucks drop, pallets hit staging, teams crash the load, dairy first to protect temperature control, then produce, then ambient. The building breathed because the blueprint told it how. Meanwhile, the supercenter format absorbed roles towns used to spread out. Vision centers sold glasses at prices that undercut local opticians. Photo labs shifted to online upload and same-day pickup. Garden centers doubled as seasonal distribution nodes, flipping from mulch to Christmas trees to patio sets with minimal rework. Tire and lube turned car maintenance into dwell time that bled into discretionary aisles. Each service bolted on a reason to stay, a reason to return, and a reason to tell a neighbor it saved them a trip. Pricing rules held firm. EDLP set a floor that competitors couldn't consistently duck under without bleeding. The supercenter didn't need to shout, it needed to be obvious. A milk price printed large. A gallon jug of windshield fluid at a number that felt like an anchor. The anchors framed the rest. Once a shopper internalized those markers, the store had permission to be fair across 1,000 small tags they'd never memorized. In food, perishables demanded a new kind of supplier relationship. Cold chain discipline, dock times, trailer temps, case life, blended with OTIF to make misses painful. Suppliers who mastered shelf-ready produce packs or dairy crate flow earned space. Those who couldn't saw shrink eat their margin. Retail Link taught a different language here, not just volume and turns, but throwaways and freshness windows. The Supercenters grocery didn't just sell food, it measured waste like a sin. Critics said the building cannibalized the local grid. In many towns it did, but the draw came from gaps as much as from theft. Where banking deserts existed, money centers stepped in. Where clinics were booked, in-store care soaked up minor ailments. Where pharmacies closed, the counter by aisle 7 stayed lit late. It wasn't charity. It was a flywheel. More rolls meant more trips meant more spend justified more rolls. Online arrived and the format flexed. Curbside pickup turned the store into a micro-fulfillment node overnight. Associates picked from the same aisles shoppers walked, learning a second choreography that threaded around carts and strollers. Refrigerated staging, insulated totes, pick path optimization, each tweak turned square footage into logistics. The last mile didn't erase the value of the box, it weaponized it. Inventory was already close. The parking lot became the handoff. Here's the quiet truth the Supercenter made plain. When a store shows up for all the ordinary needs, it becomes part of the town's plumbing. The dependence is rational because the performance is reliable. That's power, and it doesn't need a billboard to prove it. The Amazon war, bricks, clicks, and the last mile. The Supercenter turned into infrastructure just as a different kind of infrastructure woke up in Seattle. Amazon didn't need aisles, it needed servers, sellers, and speed. Walmart had density, perishables, and trust. The fight wasn't store versus website. It was whose clock could get closer to the front door without breaking the margin. Walmart started late online. The first sites were catalogish, broad SKUs, slow refresh, clunky checkout. Amazon's marketplace model exploded selection without owning inventory. Third-party sellers filled gaps, tested niches, and raced each other down on price. Walmart studied the math and bought time. Jetcom's algorithmic brain, a hiring spree for engineers, and a mandate to build an omnichannel bridge off the back of 10,000 loading docks. Omnichannel wasn't a slogan, it was a repurpose. Stores became pick centers. Associates with handhelds learned a new route, a quiet dance around customers. Grab the milk last, swap a substitution that matched price and size, keep cold chain intact to the car. BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store, trimmed shipping cost to near zero. Curbside turned parking lots into handoff lane. Last mile delivery leveraged proximity. Inventory was already blocks away, not in a distant fulfillment center. Amazon pushed prime windows tighter. 2 days became one became same day in dense zips. Walmart answered with price parity algorithms linked to retail link signals. If a SKU drifted online, the system nudged it back toward the EDLP anchor. The goal wasn't every item at the absolute lowest. It was closing the gap on the ones shoppers use as price truth: diapers, detergent, electronics anchors. Lose those and trust erodes. Trust is the currency that decides who gets your default click. Marketplace became a necessary copy. Walmart invited outside sellers onto Walmart.com, curating harder than Amazon to protect EDLP optics. Fewer sellers, stricter onboarding, tighter performance rules. The win was breadth without bloat. The risk was chaos, counterfeits, slow ship, returns, friction, things that corrode trust. Compliance culture migrated online. OTIF spirit turned into on-time ship rates, valid tracking, and fast refund. Deductions for misses followed sellers like they followed suppliers. Meanwhile, stores learned to fulfill. Ship from store routed web orders to nearby boxes with inventory to spare. Aisles doubled as miniature warehouses. Backrooms staged mail bins next to pallets. Carriers picked up at side doors where once only bread trucks docked. The edge was distance. A package traveling 5 miles costs less and arrives faster than one traveling 50. Walmart's cluster logic paid off again, this time in pixel. Price wasn't the only battlefield. Promise windows mattered. If Amazon said by 10 p.m., Walmart had to say by 8 and mean it for groceries, or at least within your pickup window without melting the ice cream. Algorithms learned neighborhoods, which slots booked, which routes jammed, which drivers hit rates, which stores picked cleanly. Misses triggered credits that hurt margin, so the system got ruthless about capacity. Cap orders when the cooler is full. Shift overflow to a neighboring store. Call it dynamic. Associates called it whiplash. Jet's Playbook smart baskets that lowered price as you optimized shipping melted into Walmart's app. Substitutions improved through data. If brand A is out, brand B wins on satisfaction and price, so suggest it first. Over time, the app recognized families like the aisles did, repeat buys, sizing quirks, seasonal patterns. Add a school supply list in one tap. Refill the same pantry staples the same week. Clicks learned the same cadence clusters taught in parking lot. Amazon leaned into pantry boxes, then groceries with Whole Foods and Fresh. Walmart leaned harder into pickup. The difference was habit. If you already went weekly for perishables, adding a curbside locker didn't change your life much, it smoothed it. If you didn't, Amazon had to install a habit from scratch or borrow Whole Foods shoppers who weren't there for EDLP. Price parity algorithms fenced that audience. Match on the anchors, win on the basket. Suppliers felt the new leash online. Content standards, image stacks, bullets in the right order, reviews monitored for pattern spikes that hint at quality drift, compliance went digital. OTIF's cousin was DSV, dropship vendor performance. Can you ship directly to the customer and keep promise windows? If not, you lose the buy box. Chargebacks ticked for wrong cartons in 3D. Late scan, wrong weight, high return rates. Last mile turned experimental. Third-party gig fleets handled same day. In-house pilots tested autonomous carts and drones in towns that would say yes. Micro-fulfillment nodes whispered from stockrooms, ASRS units that could pick ambient goods faster than humans, feeding curbside orders before a shopper parked. The capital was selective. Build where clusters would amortize it, skip where density couldn't pay it back. Meanwhile, the war wasn't only Amazon. Dollar stores nibbled at the low end. Target nailed curbside grace. Instacart taught shoppers to rent labor. Walmart kept punching in its weight class. Be the cheapest on the weekly cart, be the most reliable at pickup, keep delivery fair enough to retain trust without torching margin. The Supercenters grocery engine powered the clicks. You could feel it on Friday nights, pickup lanes full, headlights idling, totes shuttling through insulated doors like a heartbeat. Here's the twist, winning online didn't mean abandoning the box. It meant teaching the box to speak API. Inventory accuracy became a promise, not a hope. Substitutions felt like customer service, not apology. Returns turned into frictionless loops. Scan a code, hand the item, get the credit before you reach your car. The store's advantage kept showing up. It was already where people lived. Amazon kept inventing ways to erase distance. Lockers, go stores, vans tuned by machine learning. Walmart kept converting distance into proximities, edge more pickup slots, tighter pick paths, faster cold chain, algorithms that respect dinner. The winner on any given day was the one whose promise matched life most often. In thousands of towns, a blue vest walking a tote to a trunk beat a box on a porch by an hour that mattered. The last mile didn't crown a new king. It taught both giants a truth Walmart had learned with trucks and aisles. Speed is a culture, not a feature. The fight moved fast. The town stayed the arena. Green by mandate. Sustainability under pressure. While the last mile race tightened, another mandate arrived from the stage lights. Cut emissions, cut waste, cut excuses. Walmart called it Project Gigaton, pull 1 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases out of the supply chain by a date that sounded far away and uncomfortably close. It wasn't a press release flourish. It landed like OTIF with a green badge. Join the program, set targets, report progress, or explain why you aren't moving. Suppliers recognized the tone. Sustainability shifted from nice to have to quasi-compliance. Packaging cuts weren't just cost downs anymore. They came with emissions math. Corrugate weights, resin choices, recycled content, each had a number, and the number rolled up into dashboards buyers could open in meetings. The ask was familiar. Save seconds, save pennies, save carbon. The conversation just moved from pallet patterns to grams of plastic and miles of truck. The emotional pitch flipped from guilt to competence. Do the right thing because it also makes you sharper. Trucking felt the first squeeze. Fleet MPG targets rose, idle times dropped, routes tightened through software that hated empty miles. Backhauls that once felt like a bonus became policy. If a Walmart trailer delivered to store 1431, it better not come back light. DCs added door assignments that cut yard chaos and minutes of refrigeration drift. Cold chain seals got stricter. Temperature excursions meant shrink and emissions waste, a double sin. The logic was pure operations. Waste is cost, cost is price, price is promise. Refrigeration systems moved under a microscope. Leaky refrigerants aren't just expensive, their global warming potential is massive. Store retrofits swapped gases, tightened maintenance schedules, and installed sensors that tattled on pressure blips before a case full of yogurt warmed. The fix paid in 3 columns: product saved, energy cut, emissions avoided. Associates saw the change in tiny ways: more door cases on dairy to trap cold, quicker calls for service when the app flagged a drift. Packaging redesigned for speed now took on a second job. Shelf-ready cases became lighter, inks shifted to water-based, and blister packs shrank. A box that used to ship air got right-sized to cut cubes per trailer. Pallet density rose a layer when corrugate could bear it. The carbon math wasn't abstract. It sat in calculators that spat out tons avoided next to cents saved. When those two aligned, projects sailed through approvals. When they didn't, tension showed. Suppliers felt the pinch on both temples. Buyers still walked in with the old line, fined 2 to 3%, and now added a green column. Could you deliver recycled content without risking scuffs that raise returns? Could you cut shrink wrap without pallet collapse? Could you move production closer to ports to trim inland miles while OTIF still bit for misses? Vendors with engineers and capital leaned in. Redesign molds, reformulate resins, install energy meters on lines. Smaller suppliers nodded, then stared at spreadsheets that didn't bend. The mandate was real. The money to hit it wasn't always there. Renewables arrived with a billboard smile. Solar arrays spread across roofs and carports. PPAs locked in wind power for DCs. In some towns, the biggest private array belonged to the blue box. Energy managers talked in capacity factors and payback periods. Shoppers noticed shade in summer parking lots and a corporate sign that said the store now ran cleaner. The grid noticed lower peaks during hot afternoons, which cut strain and cost. Operations noticed fewer spikes on the utility bill, which made EDLP slightly easier to hold. Waste streams tightened. Back-of-house balers turned cardboard into commodity, plastics into bales with barcodes. Food waste followed a ladder. Donate first, animal feed next, digesters when possible, landfill last. Associates learn new muscle memory: sort here, not there. Scan damaged goods into salvage, log donations for pickup. The work added steps, the savings added up. Less trash haul meant fewer trucks, fewer fees, fewer headaches. The carbon math rode shotgun. Project Gigaton's reporting cadence mirrored retail link stare. Suppliers entered targets into a portal, tracked reductions in carbon categories: energy, waste, packaging, agriculture, and watched their status light change from gray to green to something more complicated. Wins showed up in presentations. Misses showed up as questions in line reviews. No one got dropped for a bad year, but momentum mattered. Part of best partner status became: can you cut emissions and cost without slowing flow? Agriculture brought the hardest knots. Regenerative practices promised soil carbon gains, fertilizer efficiency promised nitrous oxide cuts, but translating 1 million farm decisions into a buyer's dashboard was messy. Pilots with big brands mapped fields, tweaked inputs, and paid growers for outcomes. The math was probabilistic, the stakes were real. When drought hit or markets swung, growers chased survival first. Walmart's lane was influence. Nudge through major suppliers, then let the middle translate. The PR halo glowed, rightly when it did, loudly when it needed to. Critics asked who paid. Often it was the supplier fronting capital for equipment, recovering it through efficiency and volume if volume held. Sometimes it was the shopper when a product quietly moved up a few cents to cover recycled materials. Sometimes it was Walmart when a retrofit's payback ran longer than the quarter. The tension stayed. Do good, do it fast, don't raise the cart. Inside stores, sustainability looked like common sense. LEDs, occupancy sensors, doors on cases, better HVAC tuning, fewer wasted steps. Outside, it looked like fewer trucks and quieter nights. In meetings, it felt like another score to chase. Associates who grew up on OTIF learned a new acronym set and treated it the same way. Hit the number, fix the miss, move on. Here's the truth under the branding. Sustainability at Walmart works best when it rhymes with efficiency. When the rhyme breaks, pressure builds on vendors, on margins, on promises. The machine will keep trying to make the two the same song. The question is who keeps time when they don't. Ghost boxes and the comeback myth. You first notice it by the weeds. A rectangle of crabgrass grows through a parking lot the size of a small airport, ringed by light poles that click on at sunset to illuminate nothing. The box sits quiet, faded logo shadow, glass doors taped, a no trespassing sign bolted into cinder block. The town's map still orbits this corner, but the gravity is gone. When a supercenter leapfrogs to a bigger site or a cluster gets trimmed, the shell it leaves behind becomes a riddle. The floor plate runs deep, hundreds of feet without daylight. The roof span needs special trusses. The slab is cut for freezers and drains that don't match anyone else's plan. Loading docks face a back road. The parking field is an ocean. It's not that nobody wants space. It's that nobody needs this specific beast without spending money to unbuild it first. Towns try. A school board walks the site and imagines classrooms in a fluorescent sea. Then they see the HVAC load and the cost of carving windows into tilt-up walls. A church considers a sanctuary. The acoustics say no. A call center asks about fiber, then balks at fire code upgrades and the risk of a single-tenant bet in a building wrapped by empty asphalt. A discount chain looks, but the deed carries a covenant. No grocery competitor allowed. The box is empty by design and, perversely, protected from the most logical reuse. Meanwhile, the tax math turns on its maker. Abatements that once sweetened the deal expire. Appeals argue the building's depressed value. Assessed numbers drop. The sales tax that padded budget shifts to the new site across town or the next county where a wider interchange and a fresher ribbon cutting live. The old corridor loses weekday traffic. Drive-thrus hang on weekends, then two go dark. A payday lender moves in where a shoe store used to be. The center of gravity slips a mile, then two. Ghost boxes don't just waste land, they broadcast a message. The town couldn't keep what it courted. That hits morale. Realtors talking comps and absorption, but residents talking memories, first jobs, back-to-school runs, the time the power stayed on here when the neighborhood flickered. Now the building pulls no one, shadows everything, and anchors nothing. The more it sits, the more it scares capital away. Vacancy breeds vacancy. There are comeback stories, and they matter. A rural county cuts the shell into a community college campus, welding bays where garden soil once stacked, a nursing sim lab where the photo counter stood. A Midwestern town splits a former big box into a library, a fitness center, and a food co-op that built its member base in church basements and Facebook threads. A southern city lures a fulfillment tenant, racks, conveyors, outbound parcels through old garden center doors. Each win takes money, patience, and a public that agrees to live with a scar while the remodel heals. But these are exceptions because the template fights reuse. Deep boxes hate daylight, all the best second acts love it. Parking seas invite heat and crime. Good public spaces prefer shade, trees, and people. Covenants and financing structures from the original deal linger like old software, permissions you can't find the password to change. The box becomes an argument for writing stricter rules next time. Breakup-ready designs, demolition bonds, caps on single-tenant square footage, sunset clauses on use restrictions. Those ordinances arrive after the first wound, not before. The comeback myth sells a comforting idea. If the anchor leaves, another will fill the hole. Sometimes another does, but it rarely stitches the same fabric. A trampoline park brings weekends, not weekdays. A storage facility keeps lights on, not foot traffic. A flea market hums seasonally, then stalls. Economic energy shifts from daily necessity to occasional novelty. Main Street can't live on novelty alone. Shoppers aren't villains in this story. They followed price and convenience to the new edge. They'll follow it again if it moves. The problem is structural. A model that centralizes need in a single massive box creates single massive voids when it relocates. The ghost box is a physical reminder that consumer welfare, measured at the cart, doesn't price the cost of empty square footage, dead traffic patterns, and municipal budgets that swing when one tenant sneezes. Yet buried inside the ruin are clues. The co-ops that work assemble before the crisis, building trust and a base that will show up without glossy aisles. The towns that repurpose fastest have playbooks ready, pre-approved splits, flexible zoning, partners lined up to take pieces, not the whole. The retailers that leave the least damage write looser covenants and fund part of the teardown if they move. Those are policy choices, not miracles. Stand in that empty lot at dusk and you can still feel the old rhythm. Trucks at dawn, carts by noon, taillights at 5. The echo proves this corner once mattered. The question is whether the next chapter is written in advance or whether the town waits for weeds to do the editing. Human stories. 3 paths through the machine. The owner kept the receipt tape from his last day, a paper ribbon that ends with a subtotal and a silence. 47 years of keys behind the counter, cut by hand while a customer told him what the back door sticks on. He'd held off selling because his father's name was still on the deed and because he believed service could beat a fluorescent wall of tools. The Supercenter opened in March. By June, Saturdays were half. By Christmas, he borrowed against retirement to cover a vendor he'd known since '89. The line review wasn't his language. His was relationships and a coffee can of screws for customers who needed 3, not 100. When he closed, he didn't rage. He boxed the last odd bolts, smiled at a kid who came in for a free balloon, and locked a door that had never needed a lock until the foot traffic died. He drives past the ghost box now on the way to a smaller place 2 towns over where he sells repair kits online and takes calls from people who still want to fix a hinge. The habit is smaller, the pride is. Across town, the worker checked her schedule the way some people check the weather, often and with a little dread. She de-learned the store's clock because her life ran on a knife edge, daycare that charged by the minute, a bus that came late in rain, a mother whose knees hurt on stairs. 28 hours most weeks, 32 when a manager remembered she'd crushed inventory last Sunday. The algorithm never met her daughter. It didn't know that story time at the library was the 1 hour she guarded for both of them. When her hours slid to nights, she traded shifts, swapped favors, and paid in sleep. She could recount the aisles by heart, where the milk moved after the reset, which end cap hid paper towels when pallets blocked the main run, how many steps it took from freezer to staging before ice cream started to sweat. She got good at the machine's game. Scan fast, smile, hit your marks, ask for more hours with receipt. A base wage bump came and went like a weather front, welcome, thin, offset by a missing 5th shift. One manager looked out for her, another read the screen like scripture. She wasn't lazy, the system was indifferent. She didn't hate the company, she hated the clock. And when a new distribution center offered 4 10-hour days and health care starting next month, she jumped. The pay wasn't a miracle, the predictability was. Supplier still keeps the photo of his first production line, a row of presses in a Midwestern block building, American flags taped to 2 posts, the smell of oil and coffee mixing at 6 a.m. When his buyer started bringing retail link charts to meetings, he leaned forward. Numbers were a language he could learn. OTIF stung at first. Then he reorganized staging, painted lines on the floor, and put a digital clock by the dock door that counted down to cutoff. He made it until he didn't. 3 winters in a row, storms turned the highway into a rumor and the deductions eroded months of margin. The buyer asked for lighter corrugate and shelf-ready cases. He understood the why. The how meant new dies he couldn't fund without a volume promise. Volume didn't come with promises anymore. The quote from Shenzhen did. He closed 1 shift, then 2. He flew to Guangdong and stood on a mezzanine watching a line that matched his own, only faster, with dorms above and a cafeteria below. He told himself it was survival. He shipped tooling and trained a counterpart who called him sir and took notes on his shortcuts. He kept engineering at home, plus a small run for a brand that paid for made here. He visits the old building sometimes. A trampoline park took the front. Kids bounce where finished goods once stacked. He's glad they're happy. He also runs his hand along a post and feels the ghost of a morning huddle. Between these lives runs a through line, the full cart that makes sense. The owner shops there when loss runs thin because a gallon of milk is still a gallon of milk. The worker uses curbside on weeks when the second job robs daylight. The supplier texts his daughter about the cheap backpack she found during rollback because college is expensive and pride doesn't pay tuition. No one is confused about the savings. They're also not confused about the cost. The town didn't die. It bent around a building that learned its name and taught it a different rhythm. The question is simple and viral. How much would you pay to buy back your town's pace? 15, exporting the playbook. Wins, misfires, limits. The blueprint that bent American towns didn't stop at the border. It traveled, translated into new laws, new labor rules, and new shopping habits. And it met places that pushed back in ways spreadsheets couldn't predict. Mexico was the first big confirmation. Through a joint venture that became majority control, the cluster model found fertile ground. Permissive zoning in fast-growing suburbs, hungry municipalities, and a retail landscape where modern formats could leapfrog older ones. Bodegas and tienditas felt the draft as supercenter equivalents, and Bodega Aurora planted flags along new ring roads. Distribution hubs slotted in near Mexico City and Monterrey. Cross-docking shrank dwell time, and Retail Link with local twists handed buyers real-time visibility on SKUs that moved differently south of the border. Staples in smaller pack sizes, pantry basics tuned to budgets that flexed by week. Groceries locked frequency here too, but cash services pulled even harder. Bill pay, remittances, and prepaid top-ups turned stores into financial on-ramp. The Playbook learned to speak pesos without changing its verbs. Density, data, discipline. Central America and Chile followed with similar math. cluster to cut logistics, bend suppliers towards shelf-ready, and ride EDLP into households that prized predictability over promotion theatrics. The win wasn't just price. It was a feeling that the store would be stocked when you showed up, a promise that carries extra weight when volatility is a fact of life. Local brands that partnered on private label found themselves scaled overnight. Others that resisted watched facings thin. The hierarchy rewrote itself in Spanish and stayed legible. Then came Germany, where the script misread the stage. On paper, it should have worked. Dense population, strong highways, a love of value. But Germany already had its own ruthless discipline, Aldi and Lidl, hard discounters that married rock-bottom assortments with cultural instincts about frugality and no-fuss stores. Walmart arrived with American cheer, greeters bagging, smiles scripted into service, and ran straight into norms that found it odd, even intrusive. Worker councils and co-determination forced a different conversation in the backroom. Scheduling, breaks, and reorganizations weren't unilateral toggles, they were negotiations. EDLP didn't look revolutionary next to hard discounters, even tighter SKU counts and surgical costs, and the late-night pricing theatrics that might play in a US box ran into law and culture that prized stability over spectacle. Losses stacked. The exit wasn't gradual, it was a retreat. The lesson landed hard in Bentonville. Not every market bends to the same pressure, and culture can outdiscipline scale when the local incumbents already run leaner than your model. The UK offered a different kind of friction. Asda wasn't a transplant so much as an adoption. An existing grocer folded into Walmart's system. For a while, it worked. EDLP logic sharpened, supply chain discipline tightened, and private label rose in the hierarchy. But the market was crowded with players skilled at promo-heavy games, strong convenience footprints, and regional loyalty that didn't crack easily. Price wars with Tesco and the discounter surge from Aldi and Lidl squeezed margins. The US muscle, line reviews, OTIF-style pressure, shelf-ready packaging, translated, the brand theater didn't always. Over time, the promise of Walmart's playbook there felt less like a conquest and more like a long negotiation with a market that refuses to be simplified. When divestment finally came, it read like an admission. Sometimes the best version of your model is still the second best version for that place. India forced the most creative edits. Foreign ownership rules kept a straight-line entry off the table. The response was partnership and a side door. Wholesale cash-and-carry formats, supply chain modernizations behind the scenes, and later, a huge bet on Flipkart to learn e-commerce in a country where the last mile runs through scooters, neighborhood lanes, and cash on delivery. The Kirana, the corner shop, didn't disappear, it integrated. Programs aimed to wire those small stores into a bigger pipe. Digital ordering, consolidated procurement, and branded supply that trimmed their buying costs without erasing their role as hyperlocal fulfillment. In a nation where labor is law and politics is granular, the playbook could push data and logistics, but had to borrow trust from shopkeepers who already owned the street. China taught a split-screen reality. Urban hypermarkets looked familiar and grew fast, so did local competitors who copied quickly and understood tastes better. Online retail didn't nibble, it surged. Platforms like Taobao and JD rewrote the promise window and taught shoppers to think in apps. Walmart learned partnerships again, stake in JD, experiments with on-demand delivery, and discovered that the edge wasn't the biggest building, but the tightest integration between store inventory and a courier on an e-bike. The global sourcing engine still roared. The domestic retail engine had to accept a market moving at cloud speed. Across Latin America, regulation and volatility wrote footnotes on every page. Currency swings turned inventory into a gamble. Political shifts rewrote import rules mid-quarter. The cluster model stayed because trucks still beat planes on cost and stores still beat distance on trust. But EDLP had to coexist with promotions that cleared stock when inflation reset expectations overnight. Even the best algorithm can't outcalculate a policy shock. Here, human judgment stayed in the loop. One pattern repeated. Where labor law is strong and worker councils have teeth, the scheduling clock ticks differently. The anti-union levers that worked quietly in US breakrooms met structures that made bargaining a baseline, not a threat. Turnover fell, so did some flex. The machine could still hum, but the dials moved slower and with more hands on them. Price promises held where scale still delivered real savings. They cracked where the cultural definition of fair included more than the tag. Not every export attempt survived. Brazil proved lumpy. Formats that thrived in some cities stumbled in others. Exits and consolidations followed. Japan via Seiyu became a long, careful exercise in patience, local taste, and digital overlays, culminating in share sales that acknowledged the limits of outright control. Wins and retreats both trace the same constant. Infrastructure and data travel well, identity doesn't. The headline is simple and unsatisfying. The playbook is powerful where regulation lets it run. Infrastructure can be bent to cluster logic, and shoppers value predictability over performance. It's limited where labor rules anchor schedules, where discount culture is older and meaner than EDLP, and where the last mile belongs to phones, bikes, and neighborhood trust more than to boxes and docks. The machine can go global. The myth can't. And in the gaps between those two, you can see the next lever the company will reach for. A store that speaks code as fluently as it speaks price. Automation and the next squeeze. The next lever didn't arrive with a memo. It rolled quietly across polished floors, a tall, slow robot scanning shelves at dawn, a boxy scrubber tracing the same loop every night without a complaint. Associates gave them nicknames and learned to step around them. The point wasn't the novelty. It was a new math. Minutes shaved by machine, errors caught by vision, orders picked by people following prompts that felt like a metronome. Inventory stopped being a guess and started being a camera feed. Vision systems looked down aisles and flagged outs, wrong facings, and phantom counts that used to waste half a shift. A handheld didn't just say find it. It said bin 3, back row, second shelf, then told you the 5 next picks along the most efficient path. Micro-fulfillment units slid into backrooms like vending machines for ambient goods, pulling cereal and canned soup with robotic arms while a human handled produce and cold. The promise was simple: speed up the boring parts so the tricky parts, freshness, substitutions, service, get more human time. The reality was messier. The system took the easy minutes first, which happened to be a lot of minutes. Upstream, portals changed tone. Supplier scorecards layered predictions onto penalties. The system didn't just log that you missed Tuesday, it predicted next Tuesday's miss if your plant schedule and transit times didn't change, then booked deductions in advance if you ignored the warning. OTIF became a rolling forecast with teeth. Case packs tweaked for shelf-ready packaging now had to match robotic grippers and tote dimensions for backroom automation. If your corrugate bowed at the wrong humidity, a machine stalled and a fine landed. Compliance moved from what happened to what will happen if you don't fix it now. In dry grocery, automated picking raised the ceiling on volume per labor hour. In general merchandise, vision caught defects and mislabels before a customer did. At the front end, cameras watched queues and opened self-check lanes on a schedule that felt psychic. Labor didn't disappear, it moved. One person trailed 5 self-check stations instead of 1 register. Another hosted Curbside, swapping a scanner for a headset and a sprint between cold staging and hatchback trunk. The best associates stopped being the fastest at one task and started being the smoothest at switching tasks without dropping pace. Wage pressure didn't vanish, it sharpened. Markets that raised floors forced a choice: eat margin, raise prices, or cut labor. Automation made the third option feel responsible. A scrubber saved a janitorial shift. An inventory drone counted the top shelf without a ladder and a second person as a spotter. Those hours reappeared as customer experience, zoning, quick picks, faster curbside, but always with a ratio in mind. Squeeze here, invest there, net out even or better on payroll. On paper, it made sense. In break rooms, it felt like one more push. Do more, faster, with tools that help until they hiccup. The tools hiccuped. A robot stalled in a narrow aisle during holidays and blocked the easiest path to toys. A vision system flagged an out on an item sitting 3 inches off its expected planogram slot and triggered a cascade of replenishment pings. A micro-fulfillment arm jammed on a promo shipper that marketing dropped without telling the automation team. Every fix was a lesson and a reminder that code writes rules people once bent on the fly. Customers felt the edge in seconds. Pickup windows got tighter and truer. Substitutions got closer to right because the system learned which swaps passed the trunk test. Returns moved faster as receipts lived in the app, and barcodes told associates exactly which tote to check for a missing item. The store started to feel like a living database, every scan, every pick, every return feeding a loop that cut waste and time. That loop didn't care about nostalgia. It cared about accuracy, velocity, and cost. Suppliers learned a new dialect of urgency. Predictive orders hit earlier. Safety stock got interrogated. If your lead times drifted, the portal nudged a shift in plant sequencing or suggested a regional DC you'd been avoiding because your trucking contract was thin there. Penalties for misses stacked faster, but so did wins for perfection. Hit the model's marks, and your item moved up in search results online, gained room on an end cap, or earned an automatic reorder threshold that smoothed your peaks. The carrot got smarter along with the stick. Stores leaned on cameras and AI for shrink, too. Not the headline-grabbing stuff. This was pattern recognition that spotted a cart with high-risk mixes, an exit with repeat no-scans, a self-check flow that always ran hot at 8 p.m. The aim wasn't confrontation. It was loss prevention through design. More attendance at the hour the model called vulnerable. Better prompts on the screen when a certain item scanned. Fewer blind spots between cosmetics and pharmacy. Every point saved was a point that didn't have to show up in price. The promise to workers shifted. The company said the machines would take the hard, dull, and dangerous. Some of that happened. Fewer ladders, fewer back injuries, fewer overnight wax jobs. But the new hard thing was mental, juggling roles, meeting targets set by systems that didn't get tired, living with a score that updated every shift. The path up still existed: automation techs, department leads who spoke both planograms and APIs, managers who could rebalance a curbside queue mid-storm. The path narrowed for those who didn't want to speak that language. In smaller towns, the automation squeeze met a different limit. There's no competitor left to soak up labor if hours fall. Dollar stores plateaued. The regional grocer closed 2 towns over. Walmart became the sole generalist anchor, a job market and a food system in one. When hours flexed down after a tech win, there wasn't an easy second shift across the street. The store's responsibility got heavier, even if no one said it out loud. Associates did. So did school principals when sports schedules collided with peak hours. And daycare managers when Curbside suddenly needed 3 more runners at 5 p.m. The tension landed where it always does, in the cart and the clock. Automation kept the promise of low prices believable in a world where fuel, wages, and freight jumped. It also turned more of daily life into a forecast that people had to fit themselves into. The machine got better at predicting. People got better at adapting. Somewhere between those two, a town's rhythm tilted a few beats faster and a little less forgiving. What's left is the bargain most places have already made. Accept a store that behaves like infrastructure and a job that behaves like an app, in exchange for a cart that still feels affordable and a pickup slot that shows up on time. The next squeeze won't announce itself. It will arrive as a smoother return, a faster substitution, a quieter floor, and a schedule that moves like code. Resolution and meaning. The discount felt like relief, but it traded roots for reach, and roots don't regrow on a schedule set by an app. You didn't do anything wrong, the system trained you. Now you can see the levers: price, habit, speed, and trust. If you want to see how the other half of this machine learned to move your cart by code, watch our Amazon episode next and subscribe for the stories that explain the prices you live with.